Hello, 8th grade. So this video is going to go over the notes for this week, LP22 notes. We're going to have systems of equations in the real world. So this is where we're going to have some word problems, and you are going to go through the full process of developing your equations, solving the system, figuring out what our final answer is. Put your name at the top. Boom, I'm Ms. Baker. Welcome to your math video this week. So there are 4 steps to solving a word problem using systems of equations. They are written up at the top. We're going to go through all 4 of these steps as we solve this example problem. It goes on to the second page, and that'll be for your notes. So step 1, identify the variables in your problem. Step 2, we're going to write the equations. Step 3, we're going to solve the system of equations, solve our equations using the substitution method. We learned that last week in LP21. Go review your notes if you need to. Step 4, final answer. You want to make sure you label the answers clearly so that we know what we're talking about at the end. So our example problem here, a school is preparing to take 177 students on a field trip. They rent 7 vehicles to transport the students. The rented cars will hold 3 students in each car. The rented buses will hold 55 students in each bus. So how many cars and how many buses were rented for the field trip? So we are going to choose our variables. We're going to figure out what we're talking about in our first step. So looking through this problem, we are taking 177 students. We are getting 7 vehicles. Cars hold 3 students. Buses hold 55. So all I did was kind of figure out, pull out, highlight the important bits of information in our problem so that we can then use it to figure it out. So my first variable, or to figure out the variables that we need, we're going to look at the question. So we're trying to figure out how many cars and how many buses. So that's what our final answer needs to be. So I'm going to use the letter C for cars. I'm going to use the letter B for buses. Okay, you can use whatever variables make sense to you. If you want to do X and Y, you can do that. I like to make my variables match what it is I'm talking about. So C for cars and B for buses, because it helps me keep track of what's going on in the problem. Now that we've picked our letters, we want to write what that represents. So C is the number of rented cars. And B, of course, is the number of rented buses. Okay? So now that I have chosen my variables, I have clearly labeled what they mean. We have identified them. Now we want to start building our equations. So you are going to have 2 equations in our problems. Okay? The first piece of information is that we are getting 7 total vehicles. So all of the cars and all of the buses are going to equal a total of 7. And there is our first equation. C plus B equals 7. So 7 total vehicles. The second equation, we're going to actually worry about the people. So each car can hold 3 students. So 3 students times the number of cars tells us how many students are in the cars, plus 55 students in each bus to give us a total of 177 students, right? And so your first is just the generic kind of basics. The second is dealing with how many students we've got. And that's it. There are 2 equations. So 3 students per car and 55 students per bus all together is going to give us 177 students. Okay. Now we've finished our first page. I'm going to pull those equations onto the second page just so we've got them at the top where we need them. Okay. So on page 2 up at the top, we had cars plus buses equals 7 total vehicles, 3 students per car plus 55 students per bus for a total of 177 students. So now we're going to solve this using the substitution method, right? The first thing we want to do is make sure one of our equations has a variable by itself. So I'm going to change this C plus B equals 7. I am going to subtract B from both sides, and that's going to leave me with cars equaling 7 minus the number of buses. Okay, so I just rewrote that equation so I have a variable all by itself. Now that we've done that, and we're just reviewing the substitution process from last week, now that we've done that, we are going to use the second equation, 3 cars, 3 students per car plus my 55 students per bus equaling 177 students. We're going to use that second equation. We're going to substitute into that equation. So cars, C, can be replaced by 7 minus B. Okay, so now we only have a single variable to use. We've only got the number of buses in this. Now we're going to follow our processes. So the first thing we do is distribute. So 3 times 7 is 21. Negative B times 3 is going to be negative 3B. So 21 minus 3B plus 55B equals 177. So all that I am doing is starting to work out what my variable is. Okay, we distribute. Next, we want to combine like terms. So my 21 comes down. I got negative 3 and I got 55B. 55 minus 3 is going to give me 52B. Oops, let's make sure that's a positive. So there should be a plus in between that. And it all equals my 177 still. Now notice I'm working neatly to keep my equal sign lined up. I recommend you do the same. It's a lot easier to keep track of your work. Now we got a 2-step equation. We're going to get rid of that 21. If you minus 21 on both sides of that equal sign, we're going to minus our 21. It cancels out on the left side. I am just left with that 52B. On the right side, 177 minus 21 should be 156. Very, very last step here. We are going to divide both sides by 52. That way we can get that variable all by itself. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, divide by 52. That leaves me with a lonely B here, and B equals 156 divided by 52 is 3. Okay, once we know what B is, our very last step, I'm going to come on back up here. I'm going to reuse that C. Oops, not what I wanted. I wanted to copy it. I'm going to reuse that part of the equation. So C equals 7 minus B. We are going to replace B with what we know. We know B is 3, so then 7 minus 3 gives us 4. So once we've gone through and done the math, we know what our variables equal. B equals 3, C equals 4. Now we want to clearly label our answers. So we found out that B equals 3. We found out that C equals 4. So now what we want to do is figure out what the heck does that mean in the context of our problem. So remember, way back on page 1, we said B is the number of buses. So if B equals 3, that means the school rented 3 buses. C equals 4. Well, C was the number of rented cars. So C equals 4. The school rented 4 buses. Boom. That's it. So there are 4 steps. We identified the variables. We figured out what the heck we're talking about. We wrote our equations using the information given to us in our problem. We solved it using the substitution method we learned last week, and then we just made sure we clearly labeled our answers so they made sense. And that's it. Okay, once your notes are all filled out, get this turned in, and we will be moving on to the LP22 assignment for this week. All right, great job, everyone.